The question is how to escape the pain of awkwardness and vulnerability. The quick answer is you can't. It's a fact of life. You're just going to feel stuff. You're going to feel awkward and vulnerable. The person, meaning the physical body, the mind, and the emotions, isn't who we are ultimately, but we embody it. And it's what we use to get around and function. And it's, by its very nature, vulnerable. We could be cut, we could be stabbed, we could be shot. Sad to say, but that's just how that is. All of that is felt. And part of being awake is accepting that and accepting it so fully that there's really no defense against it. If we live in fear of being attacked or being hurt, we tend to close up and have a shell around us that separates us from other people and creates this illusion of duality and alienation, despair, all of that. We feel alone and we're not sure why, but part of it is a defense against vulnerability. The way to deal with that is to first realize that we are vulnerable on the level of a person. We're just vulnerable. We're emotionally vulnerable. People will say things that upset us, that hurt our feelings, that make us feel stupid. We'll have judgments that'll come up. And our job is to feel those feelings and allow them fully. The parts of us that react, that get hurt, that are part of what I would call a reified self, a separate self that's an illusion but feels solid and feels like us. It hurts. People hurt us. They make fun of us. There's all kinds of stuff that'll happen to that person. When we wake up, we realize that we are the consciousness within which that person appears. We're, in a sense, embodying that form. And the form is an illusion. Its solidity is seen through. It's a temporary form. It's constantly changing. It's like a cloud that's going by. It doesn't have a permanent, solid self nature. It seems to, but it doesn't. It's constantly changing. And if we just look at the biology of it and how the cells are constantly dying and being reborn, the bones are getting remodeled, the entire body is constantly breaking down and being built back up. It's more like a river than a solid thing. When we embody it consciously, there's an energy that comes to us that, for one thing, it keeps us alive. Second is, it's like a current of joy, sometimes called nectar. It's a blissful energy that arises when we're in touch with our true nature. And it enlivens and in some sense embodies this transient, apparent form and makes it make sense. And part of that is realizing that the body is vulnerable. It could die at any time. We could have an aneurysm in our brain that we don't know about. Just boom, gone. That's just the body. So one of the insights in the spiritual process when we start out is, I am not the body. That we're pure consciousness, and the body is an appearance that arises within us. There's a persistent illusion that we're the body. I was reading something the other day in the newspaper. I do read some news just to keep up with what's going on. And there was a sentence, we see this stuff all the time, about a person who had died, and the sentence said something along the lines of, this is where he was buried, or how he was buried, and what happened. And just that construction, where he was buried, that's not you. The body's not you. It wasn't you before you were born. It's not going to be you after you die, and it's certainly not you right now. It's an emanation of sorts. It's empty, meaning it doesn't have its own self-nature. It doesn't have its own power. It would be like an appliance that is just inert unless you plug it into the life force. It comes alive, and we confuse life with death, really. We confuse the eternal and the temporary. We confuse the real the unchanging reality that we are with the changing forms that appear. And the body's just one of those forms. So we enliven it. We live fully. And part of that, again, is that we're vulnerable. What we want to do, if we want to wake up, is first realize that you're not the body. And just remind yourself of that. If you're having a difficult time or something happens to the body or there's fear about the body, just remind yourself, I'm not the body. I have a body, but I'm not the body. So that's a big part of it. I'm not my emotions either. And yet, emotionally, I can be hurt. Emotionally, I might feel things, grief, sadness, fear. Those are also passing appearances. They're like phantoms, and we can experience them, feel them fully, and they dissolve. They're never actually real. They never become something, like in my experience, if I feel an emotion, the emotion doesn't tell me who I am. The basis of it is that I am consciousness, and the feeling arises and it's an object within me, within the field of who I am. So it's helpful to just remind yourself that I'm not my emotions. I have emotions. I feel emotions. And I can feel them fully. Some of them may feel really difficult, and there may be a sense of vulnerability there, like fear, sadness, frustration. There's this judgment that wants to come in and say, oh, I'm no good, or I'm not spiritual. I'm doing all this meditation. I'm doing all these practices, prayer, self-inquiry. Who am I? I'm working on it. I'm getting some light. I'm starting to wake up. I can feel it. And there's a pleasant feeling associated with that, a feeling of lightness. Like I said, it's kind of a blissful joy to it. We may get a taste of that, and it's wonderful. And it keeps us going. What happens is we may clear some patterns on the surface of self, and then underneath that, there are other patterns that will probably take us over. At least they'll get triggered. And I said in a previous video that in traditional Advaita Vedanta, they call those Vasanas. They're likened to seeds that are dormant. And then when they get triggered, it's like a seed that sprouts. And what we want to do is, first of all, remember that your true nature is pure awareness. You are that. So your job is to be aware of what you feel. If you get triggered, so even though linguistic construction of that is problematic, let's say anger comes up, and it can come up out of nowhere. Like, man, where'd that come from? It's like from out of the storehouse of emotion that's been stored there. It starts to sprout, it starts to make itself known, and you start to feel it. And it's as if it tries to take over the body and make you really angry and act out in ways that can be destructive. You can hurt people that you care about. And it's difficult because when you hurt people you care about, that can continue, that can keep going, can build, can lose relationships. That can be really destructive. So as awareness, we just observe the being triggered part. What does it feel like? What does it look like? The mind, the way it perceives structures, internal structures, emotional structures, it can have different senses to it. For example, it could be visual. So sometimes anger is associated with the color red. I'm seeing red, that could be that. The thing is, we don't know until we look. We're noticing beings. As that awareness, we notice without judgment. Interesting. So maybe the color red, maybe the sensation might be heat. There's heat, the pulse increases, the body starts to get into a more agitated state. Sometimes that's mistaken for aliveness. Sometimes anger feels like a quote-unquote good thing, like it's making us feel alive. That's, generally speaking, not true at all. Anger does happen. We may get triggered and become angry. It's just we don't want to seize upon it as a good thing in itself, because then we'll just make that part of our personality and we'll be an angry person walking around. And it's not a happy situation. what we're trying to do is observe it. So visual, red, kinesthetic sensation, maybe heat. It might have a certain shape. It could be spiky. It could have a three-dimensional kind of shape to it. It might have a certain density. You may hear something. It may have a sound. Become curious. We're looking at this structure we're calling anger as it emerges from the depths. What it tries to do is convince us that we're it and that, oh no, I'm angry. The fact is, it's a form of anger emerging. It's angry. In a way, it's just a structure of energy that was stored from the past, and it's just releasing that energy. If we can observe it without making a self out of it, without ego coming in and putting the label I on it and saying, oh, that's me, I'm no good, or there I go again, that kind of thing, with a sense of devaluing self, describing self, identification with it. If we can just see it, it'll just, as I said, sprout and die. In Advaita Vedanta, they say it's as if the fire of knowledge is baking the seed or roasting it. Sometimes I like to think of it as being fried or deep frying our vasanas. So the anger, for example, tries to lash out. And if we allow it fully, and that could feel vulnerable. We're talking about vulnerability. That kind of thing can happen any time, and it comes from within the psyche, within the self. So we need to be vigilant with that and just observe, be aware, and notice the tendency to judge and see if you can suspend that and refrain from judging it. Anger isn't bad. It's just, it would be like you're on a nice stroll and some weird plant sprouts up in front of you. And it's like a Venus flytrap, which is kind of a weird plant. You know, it's got this hungry mouth that eats meat and things like that. Carnivorous plant. Notice its structure. Become curious about it. We're not trying to make it into something. We're just trying to see what's there. And when we witness it fully, down to the root, just notice. You don't have to think about it. Just notice its quality, its shape, its structure, and then just sit with that and let it dissipate. Notice if any judgments come in on top of that, judgments about self or, oh, anger's bad. I think sometimes, I know when I was younger, it feels like a loss of control. That's a certain kind of vulnerability where you get taken over by a hostile emotion coming from within you, and it makes you do things that you regret later. And that can feel really vulnerable, as if you have an enemy and it's you. And you never know when he or she is going to strike. It's important to remember that our true nature as pure awareness is not affected by that. There's a sense of bondage or duality that arises with our experience sometimes, and all it is ego coming and saying, oh, that's me. That's all it is. It's a mental habit. Notice that habit. You are the awareness that doesn't judge. If a judgment comes in, that's not you. That's the mind that's doing that. The mind judges. That's just what it does. Noticing that takes its power away. So we want to, in a way, allow that vulnerability to sprout and then express itself and then die. And then it dissolves, and then that layer of whatever that was is gone, and we're more free after that. So the vulnerability is always some form of, oh, me. Like, oh, I don't, I need to guard against that. I need to defend against it. You don't need to defend against anything. The only thing that puts up a wall is a sense of egoic self that's limited and afraid and is hiding behind walls that it's built. That's really a form of suffering, and it's part of the reason why we sometimes feel so lost and alienated. We're just isolated from the rest of the world. In the Tao Te Ching, it says, without even opening your front door, you can be at one with the world. You don't have to be super gregarious or go out and get involved in a bunch of social activities to feel connected. You can feel connected right now just sitting here. You are the truth. You are the being. You are the reality that is eternal, unchanging truth being reality right now. The only reason it seems not to be so is the structures that come up and the tendency to judge them and make a self out of it. Another point of vulnerability that's similar could be we really don't know what's going to happen. We can try to predict the future, but we really don't know what's going to happen. So it could be something internal. It could be a physical thing. Again, we might have an aneurysm that explodes. We can't know that. You could get a scan, but there might be something they didn't find. So we're living with this sense of mortality. It could go at any time. We tend to live as if that's not the case. It's important to remember that. The phrase memento mori, like it's a remembering, like one day I'm going to die. But what that really means is the body's going to die. You're not going to die. The body ceases to function and it falls away. Who you are is beyond that. It's prior to that. So you don't, in some sense, stop being. But on a practical level, that sense of vulnerability is hanging out there. And then, of course, the emotional stuff that can come up that seems beyond our control. Then there's just stuff that happens in the world. Political things, stock market fluctuations, the economy doing what it does. Opportunities arise, and then some are missed. There's a constant sense of uncertainty and a lack of control that can be very intimidating and scary. And that can be a point of vulnerability. Like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I don't know what's going to happen. Like AI, what's going to happen with AI? We really don't know. We have predictions, but we don't know. Part of the brilliance of waking up is embracing that. We don't know. And it's a form of embracing truth to embrace that and to allow whatever vulnerability we feel as a result of that to deepen even. That not knowing deepens into a space where it's as if the vulnerability, the feeling as if we could be hurt or harmed or attacked, if we embrace that fully, it goes deeper and deeper and gets closer and closer to this element of what I call not knowing that's more like a spaciousness. When we wake up to that, and to the degree that we realize that we are that, we can't be harmed. It would be like someone trying to harm space itself. You can't shoot it, you can't cut it, you can't grasp it, you can't exploit it. You could put things in it, but the space is still there. It's, in a sense, eternally present. I'm not talking about physical space or the concept. I'm talking about the spaciousness of our true nature as reality, prior to thought. It's, in a sense, embracing the vulnerability of our situation in an absolute sense. So there's complete vulnerability all the way through. Spaciousness can't be harmed, and in a sense is completely vulnerable to the point where there's nothing there that can be attacked. It's more like that. What bothers us about vulnerability is the thought that we shouldn't be vulnerable, or that being vulnerable is a bad thing. So we tend to, again, reify the self through the ego and defend against vulnerability when it's a fact of our existence. So we realize the truth at some point, which is that, oh, we should be vulnerable because we are, and we embrace that. It's not that we walk around being fragile. There is a sense of the body being fragile. The reality of what we're calling the body is pure consciousness, the being of the body, the beingness, the existence of the body, before we can name it or talk about it, before we can think about it. The reality of the body is pure consciousness. It cannot be harmed. And when we realize that, it protects us and we don't have to think about it. Because it's not a thing in itself anymore, it's an emanation of our true nature. So we're noticing what's going on around us, we're listening, we're not in fear, so we're just tuned in. And danger can be perceived from a distance, as it were. There's no guarantee of that, though. There's no control. There's just noticing. It's, as I said earlier, the noticing of a structure within the psyche, like one of those seeds sprouting, like a seed of anger. Oh, interesting, and then it falls away. That's the Cliff's Notes version, the short version of that. We become curious about what arises. If I'm feeling vulnerable, it's because I'm identified with an aspect of self that's in the body, it's felt in the body, it's part of the body-mind. It'll have a physical, mental, emotional component. And on some level, freedom from that means to surrender this reification of self. So it's to embrace what appears as vulnerability and yet flows past like a cloud. So I'm describing things that are not ultimately real. I remember before I woke up, I definitely had a lot of fears, a lot of difficulties. I just trusted that there was a higher power that would help me if I would surrender to it. For me, the way I grew up, the texts that I read, the books that were given to me and that I studied and so on, taught me that what we call God is not, well, it's not a dude. It's not a, I always think of that muscular bearded man figure on the Sistine Chapel ceiling, reaching out. We develop a sense of trust or faith in that higher power, whatever we call it, and it helps us. And then the moments where we feel lost or afraid or confused, I would always turn to that, and it would help. Some people would say, let go and let God. It's something like that. I just don't recommend that we adopt this belief in a dualistic sense of self and deity, because it's not really how it works. I think it's okay. I mean, people need religion just to deal with life. If they have a concept of some kind of creator or deity, then that's fine. It's just if you want to wake up, truly wake up, the insight is that whatever absolute reality is, and the word God is just a label for that and puts a face on it. But when we get past all that, it's just reality, and we are that. So we hear that, we're taught that, and we live that. We're not the mind, we're not the body, we're not the emotions, we're the eternal witness to all of that. And to the degree that we wake up to it, we experience more flow in life, more peacefulness, more harmony. It's satisfied being that. So we're not looking for anything, we're just living, and it's basically peaceful.